The sharp command cut across the driveway. "Step off the property before I make this a lot worse for you," Officer Derek Payne said, as his hand closed around the phone Marcus was holding, the deed confirmation glowing on the screen, and shoved it back into his chest. Marcus Webster remained silent, back straight, and face unreadable, as Payne brought the cuffs into view and closed them around his wrists. Payne steered him toward the patrol car with a hand on his shoulder. Not rough enough to be a shove, just enough to make the point. What Derek Payne didn't know was that soon enough, he would be required by law to call this man chief. The gutters needed work. Marcus Webster stood in his driveway and stared at the left side of the roofline, coffee thermos warm in his hand, the early morning air cool against his face. A small sag in the metal channel pulling away from the fascia board. Nothing serious. Nothing he couldn't fix with the right ladder and an hour to spare. He made a mental note and took a slow sip of coffee. The house was a craftsman-style home on Linden Court. White siding, dark green shutters, a wide front porch with 2 wooden steps that creaked just slightly on the left side. He had bought it without ever setting foot inside it. His realtor in Atlanta had sent him photos and a video walkthrough on his laptop, and Marcus had looked at every single one with the focused attention of a man making a serious decision. Then he had signed the papers. He didn't need to walk through it first. He knew what he was buying. Not just the house, the street, the neighborhood, the city. He knew Greystone Falls, Georgia. The way you know a place that shaped you, even when you spent years trying to put distance between yourself and it. He had driven in from Atlanta and checked into a motel on Route 9. He wanted to see the house in daylight first. He wanted to stand here in the driveway with his coffee and just look at it, the way a man is supposed to look at something he worked his whole life to earn. In a short time, he would be sworn in as Chief of Police of Greystone Falls. Right now, he was just a man in jeans and a Georgia Tech sweatshirt studying his gutters. The street was quiet. A few houses down, someone's sprinklers hissed on. A dog barked once and went silent. The morning was soft and golden, the kind that made you feel like everything was going to be all right. Across the street, a curtain moved in the front window of a beige colonial house. Marcus didn't notice. He was already thinking about the ladder. He heard the car before he saw it, the low rumble of an engine moving slow, the way a car moves when the driver isn't going anywhere in particular, just looking. A black and white patrol unit rolled to the curb and stopped. Marcus watched it. He didn't move. He kept the thermos in his hand and stood exactly where he was. On his own driveway, on his own property, in front of his own house. The driver's door swung open. The officer who stepped out was a big man, broad through the shoulders, gut pushing against his uniform shirt. A walk that said he owned every sidewalk he had ever stepped on. He had pale skin going red at the collar and small eyes that moved fast. His name tag read Payne. He looked at Marcus the way some men look at a problem they have already decided how to handle. He smiled. That was the part that set Marcus's jaw tight. Not the patrol car. Not even the way Payne was already squaring his shoulders as he crossed the street. It was the smile, easy and wide, and completely without warmth. The smile of a man who was enjoying himself before he had even said a word. "Hey there!" Payne stopped at the edge of the driveway. He didn't step onto it, not yet. "What are we doing here this morning?" Marcus looked at him steadily. "Drinking my coffee." Payne's smile didn't move. "Mm-hmm. And whose house is this?" "Mine." Payne tilted his head, slow, theatrical, like Marcus had just said something genuinely funny. He looked at the house, then back at Marcus, then at the house again. "That right?" "That's right. You got some ID on you?" Marcus had years of practice keeping his voice level in moments that didn't deserve level. His pulse hadn't changed. His hands were steady. He reached slowly into the back pocket of his jeans, deliberately, carefully, because he knew exactly how this kind of moment could go, and produced his Georgia driver's license. Payne took it, looked at it. His eyebrows went up just slightly. "Atlanta?" He said it like an accusation. "Long way from home. I live here now." Payne handed the license back without looking at Marcus. He was already reaching for his radio. "Going to need you to step back from the property, sir," he said, "while we get this sorted out." Marcus didn't move right away. He looked at Payne, at the easy certainty on the man's face, at the way he was already done listening, and felt something old and familiar settle in his chest. "Not yet," he told himself. "Not here. Not like this." He stepped back. 2 more patrol cars turned onto Linden Court. Marcus counted them the way he had been trained to count things. Fast, quiet, automatic. 2 units. That meant at least 2 more officers for 1 man standing in a driveway with a coffee thermos. The cars pulled to the curb on either side of Payne's unit, boxing in the front of the property. Doors opened. 3 officers stepped out, hands loose at their sides, spreading into a loose half circle at the edge of the lawn. One of them, a young woman, stood near the second car and didn't advance. She stood still and watched. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes were moving over everything. Payne hadn't stopped smiling. "You said this property is yours," he said, walking back across the street toward Marcus. Slow, unhurried, like he had all the time in the world. "Then you won't mind showing me something more than a driver's license." "I have the deed confirmation on my phone," Marcus said. "Let's see it." Marcus reached into his front pocket, unlocked his phone, pulled up the email from his realtor, the one with the signed purchase agreement, his full name, and the Linden Court address printed clearly at the top. He held the screen out toward Payne. Payne leaned forward, squinted at it, then leaned back. He didn't take the phone, didn't touch it, just looked at it long enough to make a point, and then looked away, like it hadn't told him anything he felt like acknowledging. "That's an Atlanta address on your license," he said again. "I just moved." "Uh-huh." Payne rocked back on his heels. "See, what happened is we got a call. Says there's someone on this property who doesn't belong here." He gestured vaguely toward the house like it was evidence. "Now, I'm not saying you're lying. I'm just saying I got a job to do. You've seen my ID. You've seen the deed. I've seen a screenshot on a phone." Payne's voice stayed friendly. That was the worst part. How friendly it stayed. "Could be anything. I can't verify that standing in somebody's driveway. It's my driveway." Payne's smile tightened at the corners, just slightly, just enough. "Sir, I'm going to need you to lower your voice." Marcus hadn't raised his voice, not even close. His tone had been flat, and even the entire time. They both knew it. The 3 officers on the lawn knew it. The young woman by the second car, she knew it too. Marcus could see it in the careful way she had gone very still. He looked past Payne for a moment. Across the street, the curtain in the beige colonial wasn't just shifting anymore. The front door was open. A white man in his 60s stood on the porch in a bathrobe, arms folded, watching. Not with concern, with interest. The way you watch something you expected to happen. Marcus filed that away. "I'm not raising my voice," Marcus said, quiet and clear. "I'm asking you to step off the property while we verify the situation." Payne took 1 step forward. His hand moved to his belt, not to his weapon, but close enough to it that the movement wasn't accidental. "That's not a request I'm going to make twice." Everything in Marcus's body told him to stand his ground. Years of law enforcement. A career built on knowing exactly what was right and what wasn't. The deed was on his phone. His name was on it. This was his house, his driveway, his front lawn, and every single person standing within 30 feet of him knew it. He stepped back anyway. He stepped back because he had lived long enough in this country to know that being right didn't always protect you. He stepped back because there were 3 officers on his lawn, and one of them had his hand near his belt, and this street was quiet, and there were no cameras he could see. He stepped back, and he kept his hands visible, and he kept his face still. "Smart," Payne said, like it was a compliment. He pulled the handcuffs off his belt. The sound they made, that flat metallic click as they came free, was very loud in the quiet morning air. "Trespassing," Payne said, casual as a weather report. "Hands behind your back. This is my property. Hands behind your back." The young officer by the second car looked down at the ground. Her jaw was tight. Her hands were at her sides, fingers pressed flat against her thighs. The posture of someone working very hard not to move. The cuffs closed around Marcus's wrists. Cold metal. His own driveway. The smell of grass and somebody's sprinklers, and his coffee going cold on the ground where he had set it down. Across the street, the man on the porch unfolded his arms. The back of a patrol car smelled like old coffee and cheap cleaner. Marcus sat with his hands cuffed behind him and his back straight, and his eyes forward. The seat was hard plastic, molded in a way that wasn't designed for comfort. A steel mesh partition separated him from the front. Through the windshield, Greystone Falls moved past in pieces. A gas station, a barber shop with its sign still dark, a church marquee that read, "Grace is not earned." He read that last one twice. Payne drove without talking. He had the radio going low. Dispatch chatter, routine stuff, and one hand on the wheel in the easy posture of a man running an errand. Like this was nothing. Like the man in his back seat was nothing. Marcus looked out the side window. He knew this route. He had known it since he was a boy, riding in his father's car, watching these same streets scroll past. The barber shop had been a hardware store back then. The gas station had been a vacant lot, but the police department building had always been exactly where it was, big and brick and permanent, like it had grown up out of the Georgia clay and decided it wasn't going anywhere. He had sworn at 19 that he would never walk into that building. He was older now. The patrol car turned into the lot. Inside, the precinct was running its normal morning routine. A desk officer typed something slowly with 2 fingers. A pair of officers in the break room doorway argued about football. Phones rang and were answered and rang again. The overhead lights were the harsh white kind that made everyone look tired. Payne walked Marcus through the main door like he was carrying in a bag of groceries. A few heads turned. Most went back to what they were doing. One officer, young, buzz-cut, sitting near the window, watched a beat too long before looking away. Payne steered Marcus to the processing area and pushed him into the chair with one hand on his shoulder. Not rough enough to be a shove, just enough to make the point. "Sit tight," he said, and went to the desk. Marcus sat. He looked at the room. Long habit. He couldn't turn it off. The layout, the sight lines, the informal geography of who sat where and why. A row of filing cabinets along the far wall, one drawer not fully closed, a bulletin board thick with papers nobody had taken down in months, a water-stained ceiling tile directly above the processing desk that someone had patched badly and recently. The city seal hung on the wall across from him. The eagle, the shield, the Latin motto underneath that he had never been close enough to read clearly. He read it now. Veritas et Justitia. Truth and justice. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he shifted in the chair, feeling the cuffs bite into his wrists behind his back, and looked at the seal again. Payne was at the desk, filling out the citation with the deliberate slowness of a man who wasn't in any hurry. He chatted with the desk officer about something. Marcus couldn't hear the words, just the low back and forth of two people being casual. Payne laughed at something. A real laugh, easy and loose. From near the door, Dana Brooks hadn't moved. She had followed the unit back to the precinct and come inside, and now she stood near the entrance with her hat in her hands, turning it in slow circles. She was watching Marcus the way you watch something that doesn't add up. He could feel it without looking directly at her. That particular quality of attention. Sharp and trying to figure something out. He knew that look. He had worn it himself years ago, standing in rooms that didn't make sense yet. She was young. Smart, probably. Careful. Definitely. The way she had stood on that lawn, hands flat at her sides, jaw set, going nowhere, told him she understood exactly what was happening and exactly how much room she had to do anything about it. Not much. Not yet. Payne set down his pen and stretched his arms over his head with a groan, like a man finishing a satisfying task. "Almost done," he called over. Like Marcus had asked. Marcus said nothing. He kept his back straight, and his breathing slow, and his face completely still. Years of keeping things inside had given him that, at least. He was very good at keeping things inside. The precinct hummed around him. The seal watched him from the wall. Somewhere in the building, a door opened, and footsteps crossed the floor. Then they stopped. Marcus didn't look up right away, but the quality of the silence had changed. Something in the room had shifted. Subtle, like a barometric drop before a storm. He could feel it. He looked up. A woman stood near the hallway entrance, a coffee cup in her hand, going nowhere. She was staring directly at him. Sheila Harlan did not move. She stood at the edge of the hallway with her coffee cup at her side, and her eyes locked on the man in the processing chair. Her brain was doing the thing it did when two pieces of information crashed into each other. Running the comparison fast, checking it twice, refusing to accept the answer until it had no choice. She had seen that face in the mayor's briefing packet, in the official press release she had helped draft, in the framed photograph that arrived from the mayor's office, still leaning against the wall in the lobby because nobody had gotten around to hanging it yet. She knew the exact set of those shoulders, the straight-backed posture, the particular stillness of a man who was very good at waiting. The man sitting in handcuffs in her processing room was Marcus Webster, the new chief of police of Greystone Falls. Sheila set her coffee cup down on the nearest desk. She set it down with the careful, deliberate precision of someone who needed both hands free and needed to do something with the fury rising behind her eyes before she used it in the wrong direction. She crossed the room toward Payne. He was at the desk, still filling out the citation, pen moving slow, relaxed, satisfied with himself the way he always was after he had handled something. He looked up when her shadow fell across the paperwork and gave her the easy grin he gave everyone. "Morning, Sheila. You see the game last?" "Derek." Her voice was low and flat. "Step over here." Something in her tone pulled the grin sideways. He set his pen down and came around the side of the desk, dropping his voice to match hers. "What's the problem?" Sheila didn't answer right away. She looked at Marcus in the processing chair. Then she looked back at Payne. When she spoke, she kept it quiet enough that only he could hear. "Do you know who that man is?" Payne glanced over his shoulder. "Yeah, trespasser I picked up on Linden Court. Got a call from—" "That is Marcus Webster, Derek." Payne blinked. "Who?" Sheila's jaw tightened. The name doesn't ring a bell for you? At all? Should it? It absolutely should. She took one step closer. He was appointed. The mayor held a press conference. There was a release sent to every supervisor in this building, including you. She paused. He is the new chief of police. The silence that followed was long and felt heavy. Payne stared at her. His mouth opened, closed. He turned and looked at Marcus again. Really looked this time. Not the dismissive glance of a man who had already made up his mind. Marcus sat straight in the processing chair, wrists cuffed behind him, looking at the city seal on the wall like he had nowhere else to be. Payne turned back to Sheila, and she watched it happen. The exact moment the full weight of what he had done landed on him. The color pulled out of his face all at once, not slowly, fast. That's no. He shook his head. That can't be. It is. He didn't say anything. Why would he have to? Sheila's voice was still low, but there was something sharp underneath it now, something she was working to keep contained. You had his ID. You had his deed confirmation. You put him in handcuffs in his own driveway and drove him here in the back of your unit. And you are standing here right now telling me he didn't say enough? Payne's mouth worked silently for a moment. I got a call. Manning called it in. Said I was just following up on a stop talking. Sheila said it quietly. Quietly enough that it cut right through him. She held his gaze for a long moment, making sure he understood exactly where he stood. Then she turned and walked to Marcus. Near the door, Dana Brooks hadn't moved. She had watched every second of it. Payne's confidence, Sheila's approach. The words she couldn't fully hear, but could read completely in the way Payne's face collapsed. She saw the fear move into his eyes and grip there. Sheila crouched slightly, reached behind Marcus, and unlocked the cuffs herself. The metal came free. She straightened and stepped back to give him room. Marcus rolled his wrists once, stood up from the chair. "Chief Webster," Sheila said. Clearly. Not quietly. Clearly. So every person in that room heard it. I am deeply sorry. This should never have happened. The title landed like a stone, dropped into still water. Chief Webster. Donna's lips parted slightly. The desk officer's hands came off his keyboard. The buzz-cut officer near the window straightened in his chair. Marcus looked at Payne. Those seconds covered a lot of ground. The driveway, the handcuffs, the smile, the theatrical tilt of the head. All of it, and delivered a verdict without a single word. Payne stood behind the desk, with the unfinished citation in his hand, and the pen loose in his fingers, and nothing left on his face. Marcus turned away from him. He straightened his Georgia Tech sweatshirt with one hand, extended the other to Sheila. "Thank you, Deputy Chief," he said, even, measured, completely in control. "I'll see you soon." He walked out. The door swung shut behind him. Nobody spoke. The overhead lights hummed and the phones sat silent, and Derek Payne stood holding a trespassing citation with the name Marcus Webster typed at the top. Dana looked at the door, then at Payne, then at the floor, jaw tight, and made a decision she had been building toward for years. The side door opened. Roman Farrell walked in from the parking lot, still shrugging on his jacket. He stopped when he felt the room, looked at Payne's face, looked at the door. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The parking lot was quiet. Marcus stood beside his truck with his keys in his hand and didn't get in. Not yet. He turned around and looked at the building behind him. The brick face of the Greystone Falls Police Department. The flag out front, hanging limp in the still morning air. the small bronze letters above the entrance that spelled out the department's name like a promise. He read it the way you read something that has meant different things to you at different points in your life. At 19, it had meant danger. At 23, starting out in Atlanta, it had meant possibility. Right now, standing in this parking lot with the indentations from the handcuffs still faint on his wrists, he wasn't sure what it meant yet. He was still deciding when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Dana Brooks was moving across the parking lot toward him out of uniform. She had changed fast. Jeans, a gray pullover, hair still pulled back the same way. She was walking with purpose, but her eyes were doing something complicated, scared, and certain at the same time, like a person who has made a decision they know they can't take back and is moving before their nerve gives out. Marcus waited. She stopped a few feet away and looked at him for a moment without speaking. Up close, she looked younger than she had on the lawn, and more tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from one bad morning. "I need to show you something," she said. She held out her phone. Marcus took it. It was a group chat. The name at the top was something sports-related, harmless-looking, the kind of name that wouldn't mean anything to anyone who didn't already know. Members. The message history went back weeks. He started reading. The first few messages were coded. Jokes that weren't quite jokes. References that needed context to understand, but landed hard once you had it. Someone asking if the new management situation had been looked into. Someone else responding with a laughing emoji and a comment about how some people needed to learn how things worked in Greystone Falls before they started thinking they could change them. Then it got less coded. They weren't bothering to disguise it much at all. There were comments about the appointment that made Marcus's jaw tighten. There was coordination. Who was working which shifts, which routes, which neighborhoods. There were names. There was a discussion about Gerald Manning that was friendly and familiar, like talking about an old teammate. And then, near the top of the thread, sent that morning. Manning is ready. Blue house on Linden. New arrival expected morning. Roman Farrell's name was on it. Marcus read it twice. Then he read it a third time, slowly, making sure he was seeing exactly what he was seeing. He handed the phone back to Dana. "How long have you been on this force?" he asked. "Years." He nodded once. "Years is long enough," he said. "Long enough to know the difference between a bad day and a bad department." He looked at her steadily. "Which is this?" Dana looked down at her phone. Her thumb moved across the screen. When she looked back up, her expression had settled into something resolved. The look of someone who has been standing at a door for a long time and has finally pushed it open. "I've known for a while," she said quietly. I didn't know what to do with it." "You're doing it now." She didn't answer that. Instead, she turned the phone toward him. The chat open. The screenshot function pulled up. She sent it. His phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. "Thank you," Marcus said. She nodded. She looked like she wanted to say something else. Instead, she just looked at him. This man who had been in handcuffs in his own driveway hours ago and was now standing in a parking lot absorbing the fact that it had been planned. And whatever she saw in his face seemed to settle something in her. She turned and walked back toward the building. Marcus watched her go. Then he got in his truck. Dunbar Street looked the same as it always had. Same narrow sidewalks. Same oak trees with roots that pushed up through the concrete. Same modest houses set close together like neighbors who had long ago decided to stop pretending they had more space than they did. Marcus parked at the curb and walked up the front path. The door opened before he reached the porch. Earl Webster stood in the doorway. Still broad through the shoulders, a dish towel over one arm. and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He looked at his son's face, not at his clothes or his posture or the truck at the curb. At his face. He stepped aside. "Come in and sit down," Earl said. "I'll make coffee. Then you tell me what they did." The suit was charcoal gray. Marcus had bought it in Atlanta the same week he signed the papers on the Linden courthouse. He had stood in the fitting room of a shop on Peachtree Street and looked at himself in the three-way mirror for a long time, not admiring it, just making sure it fit the way it needed to fit, the way a uniform fits, not just on the body, but on the person wearing it. He put it on in the motel room on Route 9, where he was still staying until the house was ready to move into. He knotted his tie in the bathroom mirror, checked his watch, left early. The swearing-in was held in the precinct's main conference room. Marcus had asked for small. No ceremony, no reception, no cameras, except the local paper's photographer, who stood near the back wall and mostly stayed out of the way. Mayor Paula Hansen was there, in a navy blazer, her silver hair pinned back, her handshake firm and her eyes direct, the look of a woman who made difficult decisions and lived with them. Sheila Harlan stood to the left in full dress uniform, hands clasped in front of her. A handful of community members filled the chairs. A pastor Marcus didn't know yet. 2 business owners. A woman from the neighborhood association who had driven to be there. The room was plain. Folding chairs and a conference table pushed to the wall, and a podium that wobbled slightly on the left side. Marcus stood straight at the front of it and raised his right hand and listened to the words of the oath. He had taken oaths before. He knew what they cost. He meant every word. When it was done and the mayor shook his hand, and the small crowd applauded, Marcus stepped to the podium and spoke without notes. He used the word accountability 4 times. He used restoration twice. He had considered the word change and set it aside deliberately. Change was a promise, vague and easy to make. Restoration was a debt. It implied something had been taken. It implied he knew what it was and intended to return it. Several people in the room heard the difference. He could see it in their faces. He thanked them for coming. He kept it short. There was work to do. He walked into the precinct as chief of police of Greystone Falls. The building shifted when he entered. Not loudly. There was no commotion, no confrontation. Just a change in the air, the way a room changes when someone walks in, who everyone has been waiting for and nobody is ready to see. Conversations shortened, movement slowed, heads turned, and then turned away, and then turned back. Marcus walked through it without breaking stride. He cataloged everything the way he always cataloged everything. Automatically, completely, the habit of years. Who met his eye and held it? Who looked away first? Who smiled too wide, too fast, with too many teeth? He noted the arrangement of desks, and who sat where, and what that said about the informal power running underneath the official structure of the place. The file room door was slightly ajar. Someone had been in there this morning. He noted it. Roman Farrell was standing near the far wall, with 2 other officers, coffee cup in hand. When Marcus's eyes moved across him, Farrell smiled, wide and confident, and completely unbothered. The smile of a man who was not afraid, who had no intention of being afraid, who wanted Marcus to know it. Of everything in that room, that smile was the most concerning thing. Marcus kept walking. His office was at the end of the main corridor. His name was already on the door. A small placard, black letters on white, slid into the metal holder. He stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at the room. A desk, 2 chairs, a window that looked out onto the parking lot, the city seal hanging on the wall above the filing cabinet. He went in, sat down, opened the top desk drawer. The photograph was still there. He had put it there before the ceremony, before any of it. A photograph he had carried for years in his wallet until the leather wore through around it, and he had to put it somewhere else. Marcus at 19, standing outside this building on a summer afternoon, thin and young, and looking at the camera with an expression that was trying to be harder than it was. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he closed the drawer. He pulled the personnel review request form from the top of the stack on his desk, uncapped his pen, and began to write. The files weren't there. Marcus had submitted the personnel review request. Formal, properly routed. Every box filled in correctly. The records clerk, a heavy-set man named Dooley, who spoke mostly in shrugs, told him the system was showing incomplete entries for the files he had requested. Some kind of administrative backlog. He would look into it. Marcus asked again. Dooley shrugged again. Still working on it. Marcus walked to the file room himself. He stood at the cabinet along the back wall and looked at the tabs. The case numbers were there. 3 formal complaints against Derek Payne, logged and numbered and indexed in the system. The folders behind the tabs were empty. He stood there for a moment with an empty folder in his hand. Then he put it back, closed the drawer, and walked to his office. He was learning the shape of it. That was how corruption worked in his experience. It didn't announce itself. It revealed itself in layers, each one a little worse than the last, each one requiring you to adjust your understanding of how bad things actually were. You pulled on one thread and 2 more appeared. You opened one drawer and found it empty, and understood that the emptiness wasn't an accident. Someone had removed those files, not recently. The dust pattern inside the folders said they had been gone for a while. 3 complaints against Payne. 3 case numbers leading nowhere. Whatever those complaints contained, someone had decided a long time ago that they shouldn't be easy to find. Marcus wrote down the case numbers and locked the paper in his desk. The story broke that evening. Marcus was still in his office when Sheila knocked and came in without waiting, which told him, before she said a word, that it was something he needed to see immediately. She set her phone on his desk, screen up. Greystone Insider, local news website, the kind that looked like journalism and operated like a message board for people with agendas. The headline was large and deliberately crafted. New police chief detained by own officers on day of arrival. Questions raised about vetting process. Marcus read it. He read it the way he read everything. Carefully, completely. Noting not just what it said, but how it said it. The story opened with paragraphs of vague concern about community uncertainty before naming him. It described the morning incident as a confrontational situation that Marcus had created by arriving unannounced and without proper coordination with department staff. It quoted an unnamed source, described as a senior department official, who expressed worry about the new chief's judgment and temperament. It did not quote Payne by name. It did not mention handcuffs. It did not mention Gerald Manning's phone call to dispatch. It had been carefully written to be almost impossible to directly refute without sounding defensive. Marcus set the phone down on the desk and was quiet for a moment. "Who runs this publication?" he asked. "Former deputy mayor," Sheila said. "Name's Cavill. He and the previous chief played golf together every other Sunday for years." Marcus nodded slowly. "How far has it traveled?" "Regional news aggregators picked it up this afternoon. There's a television station in Macon that ran an item on the evening news." He leaned back in his chair. The window behind him showed the parking lot going dark in the early evening, the last few cars pulling out. He thought about the empty file folders. He thought about Farrell's smile that morning. He thought about the way this building had gone quiet when he walked in. Not the quiet of respect, but the quiet of people waiting to see what happened next. They had been ready for him. That was the thing. Before he had unpacked a single box, before he had sat down at his desk, before he had taken the oath, they had been ready. It got worse. 2 city council members, both of whom had served alongside the previous chief's administration for the better part of a decade, issued a joint statement calling for an emergency session to review Marcus's suitability for command. They cited the Greystone insider story as evidence of what they called legitimate community concern. The session was formally scheduled. Mayor Hanson called Marcus directly. Her voice was controlled, but tight around the edges. She said she was pushing back. She said she had his full support. She said the council session was political theater and everyone knew it. Marcus thanked her and meant it. After he hung up, he sat for a long moment in the quiet of his office. Then he picked up the phone and called Sheila. "I need you to quietly find me an address," he said. "Man named Reggie Taylor. Owns a dry cleaning business somewhere on Harwell Street." "I know the name," Sheila said carefully. "Good," Marcus said. "Don't use department resources to find it." A pause. "Understood," she said. He hung up. Outside his window, Greystone Falls settled into its Friday night. Somewhere out there, in a building with his name on the door, Roman Farrell was still smiling. Not for much longer. The diner was called Millie's. It sat on the corner of Route 9 and Callaway Street, a squat brick building with a hand-painted sign and pickup trucks in the parking lot. The kind of place that had been there long enough to stop trying to impress anyone. Marcus arrived early in his personal truck, in civilian clothes, and took a booth near the back where he could see both doors. He ordered coffee and waited. Reggie Taylor arrived on the dot. He was a compact man, with close-cropped gray at his temples and the careful, measured movements of someone who had learned a long time ago not to take up more space than necessary. He wore a clean-collared shirt. He scanned the diner when he walked in, not casually, the way you look around for a familiar face, but deliberately. The way you check a room when you have been taught by experience that rooms sometimes have consequences. He spotted Marcus. Something moved across his face. Recognition. Wariness. The particular calculation of a man deciding how much to trust a situation he didn't fully control yet. He came to the booth and sat down. They shook hands. Reggie ordered coffee. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I appreciate you coming," Marcus said. Reggie looked at him carefully. "Sheila Harlan vouched for you," he said. "That's the only reason I'm here." He wrapped both hands around his coffee mug. "No offense." "None taken." Reggie nodded slowly. He looked out the window at the parking lot, at the ordinary morning moving past outside, and when he looked back, his jaw was set. "What do you want to know?" "Whatever you want to tell me," Marcus said. "Start wherever you need to start." Reggie was quiet for a moment. Then he started talking. Months ago, on a Tuesday afternoon in January, Reggie was locking up the back entrance of his dry cleaning business on Harwell Street when Payne's cruiser pulled into the alley behind the building. Reggie had seen Payne before. Everyone on Harwell Street had. But Payne had never stopped specifically for him. That afternoon, he did. Payne got out of the car and told Reggie there had been complaints about the business. "Noise complaints," he said. "Parking issues. Possible code violations that the city might need to look into." Reggie told him there were no complaints, that his business had been operating on Harwell Street for years without a single issue. Payne smiled. That smile, Marcus thought, and said that was a real shame, because complaints had a way of multiplying once the city started paying attention. Reggie asked him what he wanted. Payne told him. Cash. Monthly. An amount that wasn't small, but wasn't large enough to be catastrophic. The precise calculation of a man who understood how much a person could absorb before they stopped absorbing and started fighting back. In exchange, Payne said, the business wouldn't have any problems. No complaints, no inspections, no incidents in the surrounding area that might affect foot traffic. Reggie told him no. 2 days later, his front window was broken. The week after that, a city inspector arrived unannounced and cited him for violations that had never been mentioned in years of prior inspections. The week after that, a patrol unit sat parked directly in front of his entrance for hours on a Saturday, prime business hours, without explanation. Reggie started paying. He filed a formal complaint the week after the first payment. He described everything: the alley conversation, the implied threats, the broken window. He gave the desk officer his name, his business address, a detailed written statement. He never heard anything back. 6 other businesses on Harwell, Reggie said. His voice was steady, but his hands had tightened around the mug. That I know of. Farrell does most of the collecting now. Shows up the last Friday of every month like it's a bill. He paused. I know 2 other owners who would talk to you if they believed it would actually mean something this time. Marcus looked at him steadily. It will mean something this time. Reggie studied his face. The face of a man who had been let down before studying the face of a man, making a promise. Whatever he found there, it was enough. He reached into his shirt pocket and slid a phone across the table. That's a recording, he said quietly. Farrell, inside my shop. His jaw tightened. I started keeping records after the complaint went nowhere. Marcus looked at the phone. He didn't touch it yet. You kept this, he said. I kept it because I knew one day somebody was going to ask for it. Reggie looked out the window again. I just didn't know if that day was ever actually coming. Marcus picked up the phone. It's here, he said. The notice was in her locker. A single sheet of paper, folded once. Her name typed on the front in the department's standard font. Donna stood in the locker room and read it twice before she fully accepted what she was reading. Effective immediately, Officer D. Brooks was being reassigned to overnight patrol, District 7. Report time. The signature at the bottom was Farrell's. District 7 was square miles of industrial lots and empty roads on the far western edge of the city. Overnight. Alone. The kind of assignment you gave someone when you wanted them to understand something without having to say it out loud. She folded the paper and put it in her pocket. By noon, she had discovered the second part. She went to log into the internal communications system to check the shift briefing notes, something she did every day, and her credentials came back rejected. Access removed. She tried the case management portal. Same thing. The community liaison channel she had been added to, the one Sheila had personally approved, gone. She was still in the building, still in uniform, still technically a functioning officer of the Greystone Falls Police Department. She just couldn't do her job anymore. She sat at her desk for a long moment with her hands flat on the surface and her eyes forward, and worked on keeping her breathing even. Around her, the precinct moved through its morning routine. Phones, paperwork, the low hum of a building that didn't know, or didn't care, what had just happened to her in the locker room. Or it knew exactly what had happened, and had decided not to see it. She gathered her things and walked down the corridor to Marcus's office. She knocked twice and went in. Marcus was at his desk with a folder open in front of him. He looked up when she came in. He read her face the way she was beginning to understand he read everything, fast and completely, taking in more than most people gave him credit for. He closed the folder. "Sit down," he said. She sat. She put the reassignment notice on his desk without saying anything. He picked it up, read it, set it back down. His expression didn't change, not because he wasn't feeling anything. She had learned that much about him already, but because he was very good at choosing what to show and what to keep. "The system access too?" he asked. "All of it." He nodded once. He was quiet for a moment in the particular way he got quiet. Not empty, but full, like he was moving pieces around behind his eyes. "This is clean," he said. It wasn't a compliment. It was an assessment. On paper, it's a routine transfer. Nothing to formally reverse without giving them something to use. "I know." Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "I've watched them do it to other people. Just never thought," she stopped. "Never thought it would be you," Marcus said. She looked at the window. "I've been careful for years. Kept my head down. Documented nothing. Said nothing. Stayed invisible." She paused. "Turns out that doesn't actually protect you." "No," Marcus said quietly. "It doesn't." The honesty of it landed without cruelty. That was the thing about him. He didn't soften things to make you feel better, but he didn't sharpen them to make you feel worse. He just said what was true and trusted you to handle it. "Here's what I need you to do," he said. He leaned forward. "Everything you have seen on this force that didn't sit right. Write it down. All of it. Dates, names, incidents, anything you remember. Don't use department systems. Personal device, personal email, stored somewhere they can't reach." He held her gaze. "Can you do that?" "Yes, good." He sat back. "You are not alone in this. I need you to hold on to that." She nodded. She believed him. Not because she was naive. She had lost the capacity for naive a long time ago in this building, but because she had seen what he did with the group chat screenshot. He hadn't panicked. He hadn't deflected. He had taken it and moved. She stood to leave. "Dana." She turned. "What you did in that parking lot," he said, showing me that chat. "That took something." He paused. "Don't let them make you forget that." That evening, Marcus and Sheila worked late at the conference table in his office. Reggie's recording. The corroborating statements from 2 additional Harwell Street business owners, both contacted through Reggie, both frightened, both willing. The paper trail of the buried complaints, reconstructed from case numbers and partial records. The patrol logs showing Farrell's movements on collection Fridays. They had it laid out across the table like a map. Sheila looked at it. "This is enough," she said. "It's enough," Marcus agreed. He gathered the edges of the folder. "Get me time with the mayor." Sheila wrote it down. Outside, the precinct parking lot was empty and dark. Somewhere across the city, Dana Brooks was sitting at her kitchen table with her personal laptop open, typing everything she remembered. Years of keeping quiet, coming out one sentence at a time. The mayor's office smelled like old wood and fresh coffee. Marcus set the manila folder on Mayor Paula Hanson's desk and sat back while she read. Sheila sat to his left, hands folded, watching the mayor's face the way you watch a person absorbing something that can't be unabsorbed. Hanson read without speaking. She was a careful reader. She went through everything twice, turning pages slowly, occasionally stopping to look at a specific line before moving on. The room was quiet except for the distant sound of the building's ventilation and a phone ringing somewhere down the hall. When she finished, she closed the folder and set her hands flat on top of it. "This is a protection racket," she said. "Yes," Marcus said. "Running out of my police department." Hanson looked at the folder. Then she looked at Marcus. Something moved through her expression. Not surprise, exactly, but the particular weight of a thing you suspected being confirmed in writing with names and dates attached. "This ends him," she said. They agreed on the mechanics. Payne and Farrell formally suspended pending criminal referral to the district attorney's office. Outside counsel notified simultaneously. Sheila would handle the paperwork. Marcus would be present. It would be clean, procedurally airtight, and completely unexpected. Hanson stood and shook Marcus's hand. Her grip was firm. Sheila said. Marcus said. Marcus drove to Linden Court. He parked in his driveway and got out and stood there in the cooling air, looking at the house. The gutters on the left side had been fixed. He had done it himself, with a ladder and the right tools. The house looked right now. Settled. He stood there for a while, just looking at it. He let himself feel it. Carefully. Partially. The way you test ice before you put your full weight on it. Something close to relief. Something close to the particular satisfaction of a long job nearly done. He had been carrying the weight of this since the morning in the parking lot when Dana showed him that group chat, and before that, since the driveway. And if he was honest with himself, for years before any of it. Almost over. He called Earl. His father picked up on the second ring, the television audible in the background. Marcus told him it was almost done. Didn't give details, just that. Almost done. Earl was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Almost isn't done, son." Marcus smiled. "I know. You be careful between almost and done. That's where things go wrong." "Yes, sir." He stood in the driveway a little longer after he hung up. The street was quiet. A neighbor's porch light came on down the block. Somewhere nearby, someone was cooking something that smelled like onions and garlic in a kitchen someone lived in. He went inside. He slept well for the first time in weeks. Marcus was in his office reviewing the suspension paperwork when his phone rang. The screen said, "City Attorney." He answered. The voice on the other end was careful and precise in the way that lawyers were careful and precise when delivering news they wished they didn't have to deliver. He spoke. Marcus listened without interrupting. At morning, Derek Payne's personal attorney, a man named Harrow, years as the police union's legal counsel, who knew every procedural lever in the city, had filed an emergency motion in civil court. The motion alleged that Marcus had fabricated evidence and orchestrated a coordinated retaliation campaign against Officer Payne, stemming from personal grievance over the trespassing incident. It named Marcus. It named Sheila. It named Reggie Taylor. Attached to the motion was a sworn affidavit from Gerald Manning, the neighbor. Manning claimed he had been approached and pressured by a community figure acting on the new chief's behalf. Judge Clayton Burke, the city attorney's voice went carefully neutral when he said the name, issued a temporary restraining order blocking any disciplinary action against Payne or his officers, pending a full hearing. Marcus sat very still. The city attorney was still talking. Marcus heard him, but his attention had split. He was already moving pieces. His desk phone rang. It was Sheila. Her voice was controlled and tight. Dana Brooks had been formally suspended. A use of force report had been found in her locker, bearing what appeared to be her signature. It documented an incident she had never been involved in. The document had her name on it, and her badge number, and a date from months ago. It had been planted. They both knew it. It didn't matter. The suspension was procedurally airtight. Marcus hung up. He sat in his office, the one with his name on the door, and looked at the city seal on the wall above the filing cabinet. Veritas et Justitia. Truth and justice. He looked at it for a long time. Then he opened the desk drawer. He looked at the photograph. 19 years old, standing outside this building. The whole future still undecided. He closed the drawer. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. It rang twice. Landry, the voice said. Marcus closed his eyes for a second. Then he opened them. Victoria, he said. It's Marcus Webster. I need to talk to you. Victoria Landry did not sound surprised. That was the first thing Marcus noticed. No sharp intake of breath. No pause while she recalibrated. Just her voice, steady and unhurried, like a woman who had been half expecting this call and had decided to let it come to her on its own schedule. Marcus Webster, she said. It has been years. It has. You're in Greystone Falls now. I heard. Of course she had. Victoria Landry heard things. It was the quality that had made her exceptional on the joint task force they had worked together years ago. A federal investigation into a corrections facility in South Georgia that had ended with indictments and a complete restructuring of the facility's command. She had been meticulous and patient, and 2 steps ahead of everyone in the room at all times. Marcus had trusted her then. He trusted her now. I need to tell you some things, he said. Go ahead. He talked. He laid it out in the precise, sequenced way he had been trained to present information. The protection racket, Reggie Taylor, the buried complaints, the recording, the 2 corroborating witnesses, the coordinated group chat, the engineered arrest, then the counterattack, Harrow's motion, Manning's affidavit, Judge Burke, and the restraining order, Dana's suspension, and the planted document. When he finished, the line was quiet for a moment. The TRO is Burke, Victoria said. Not a question, yes. Clayton Burke has had lunch with Derek Payne on the 3rd Thursday of every month for years, she said. We know that because we have been watching Greystone Falls PD. Marcus went still. An anonymous tip, Victoria continued. Retired officer. Moved to Florida. Found his conscience about too late. But found it. He told us about Harwell Street. A pause. We have been building a federal case, Marcus. Hobbs Act, RICO. We have financial records. Phone and intercepts. 2 cooperating witnesses inside the operation. Neither of them. Reggie Taylor. Marcus leaned forward in his chair. Outside his office window, the parking lot sat empty and gray in the afternoon light. He kept his voice level. How far along is the case? Far enough, she said. We were planning to move in days, waiting on the last piece of the financial trail. Another pause. Your evidence, the recording, the corroborating statements, the complaint paper trail. That's not the foundation of what we have. It's the capstone. We built the house. You just handed us the roof. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He was doing the math. The TRO blocked departmental action. It said nothing about the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Payne's lawsuit, Farrell's planted document, Dana's suspension. All of it executed to stop Marcus from moving against them inside the department. None of them had stopped to consider that the department wasn't the only entity with jurisdiction, or they had considered it and decided they were untouchable. They were wrong. The motion Harrow filed this morning, Marcus said. The planted evidence, Dana's suspension, obstruction of justice, Victoria said. Witness tampering, conspiracy to deprive a federal witness of civil rights. He could hear her writing. Every move they made to protect themselves today added charges to an indictment that was already being drafted. A brief pause. They handed us more than you did, honestly. Victoria. He kept his voice even. I need to ask you something directly. Ask it. You said days. I'm asking if it can be soon. The line was quiet. Marcus counted them. I'll need the weekend, she said. The warrants are mostly drafted. I'll need to make 2 calls and pull 1 more document. Another pause. Soon works. Good. Her voice shifted slightly. Not warmer, exactly, but more direct. The shift of someone moving from professional to personal for just a moment. Marcus, what they did to you in that driveway before any of this, before the racket and the files and all of it, that alone, I know, he said. Soon, she said. Soon, he said. He hung up. He sat for a long moment in the quiet of his office. The city seal looked back at him from the wall. The parking lot outside was empty. Somewhere in the building, the precinct ran its afternoon routine, completely unaware of the conversation that had just taken place feet away. Marcus stood up. He put on his jacket. He turned off his desk lamp and walked out of his office and down the corridor and out through the front door into the cooling afternoon air. He got in his truck. He drove to Dunbar Street. The oak tree in front of Earl's house had been there longer than either of them. Marcus had climbed it as a boy and gotten stuck up and cried until his father came out and talked him down step by step without laughing once. He had thought about that tree a lot over the years, the patience of it, the way it just stood there on Dunbar Street through everything, through summers and storms and years of a sun being gone, and kept being exactly what it was. He parked at the curb and sat for a moment before getting out. The street was the same as it had always been. Narrow sidewalks lifted by old roots, houses set close together, modest and maintained. The kind of block where people knew each other's names and looked out for each other's property and had been doing both long enough that it had stopped being a choice and become just the way things were. A woman 2 doors down was bringing in her mail. She looked up, recognized Earl's son, and raised a hand. Marcus raised one back. He walked up the front path. Earl opened the door before he reached the porch steps. Still broad through the shoulders, moving a little slower than he used to, but not slow. Deliberate was the better word, like a man who had decided a long time ago that he wasn't going to rush the time he had left. He had on his reading glasses and a flannel shirt, and the expression he always wore when Marcus came to this door carrying something heavy. Not alarm, just readiness. He stepped aside without a word. They sat on the porch in the 2 wooden chairs that had faced Dunbar Street for as long as Marcus could remember. Earl brought out sweet tea without asking. The afternoon had cooled into early evening, the sky going the particular soft orange of an October sunset in Georgia, and the street settled into its quiet around them. For a while, neither of them spoke. That was something Marcus had always valued about his father. Earl Webster did not fill silence just to fill it. He understood that some things needed room before they could be said properly, and he was willing to wait as long as the room required. Marcus drank his tea. He looked at the street. He felt the specific weight of the week leaving his shoulders by degrees. Not gone, not yet, but loosening. "You want to tell me what happened today?" Earl said finally. "Not the details," Marcus said. "Not yet." Earl nodded. That was fine, too. He looked out at the street and was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I used to think you were running when you left. Gone to Atlanta." Barely looked back. He turned his tea glass slowly in his hands. Took me a few years to figure out I had it backwards. Marcus looked at him. "You weren't running away from something," Earl said. "You were running toward something, building something, getting yourself ready." He paused. "I just didn't know what for." "Neither did I," Marcus said. "Not completely." "You know now." Marcus looked at the street, at the dry cleaner on the corner. Taylor Cleaners, the sign said. Years of Reggie's work visible in the neat storefront, and the hand-lettered hours on the door. At the church 2 blocks over, whose marquee he could just make out from here. At the woman who had waved from her mailbox, back inside now. Lights coming on in her front window. Yeah, he said. I know now. Earl followed his gaze down the block. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, The city asked for somebody. Could have been anybody with the right resume. He turned and looked at his son directly. But you came back. That wasn't about a job. Marcus didn't answer right away. The oak tree moved slightly in the evening breeze. Down the street, a car passed slow with its windows down. Something with a soft, easy rhythm coming from the speakers. No, he said finally. It wasn't about a job. Earl nodded once, satisfied. He leaned back in his chair and drank his tea and looked at his street. The street he had lived on for years. The street he had raised his son on. The street he had stayed on when staying was the harder choice, with the quiet contentment of a man who had always known exactly where he belonged. They sat until the street lamps came on. Then Marcus drove back to Linden Court. He showered. He ate. He lay down in the dark in his house, on his street, in his city, and closed his eyes. He slept through the night without waking once. The deep, complete sleep of a man who knew exactly what morning was going to look like. Marcus put on the dress uniform. He hadn't worn it since the swearing-in ceremony. It had been hanging in the closet at Linden Court in its dry cleaning bag, pressed and waiting. He took it out and laid it on the bed and looked at it for a moment before he put it on. The dark fabric, the brass buttons, the badge catching the early light from the window. He dressed carefully. Every button, every crease. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror for a long moment. Not with vanity, but with the particular focus of a man preparing for something that matters. Then he picked up his keys and walked out to his truck. He arrived at the precinct. The building was already running. The overnight shift finishing the early arrivals trickling in. The parking lot filling in its usual slow morning way. Marcus walked through the front door and went directly to the main desk and told the duty officer to send word through every channel. Mandatory all-hands formation. Main hall. Every officer on every shift, no exceptions. The duty officer looked at him. Every shift, sir? Every shift, Marcus said. He went to his office and stood at the window and watched the parking lot. Unmarked vehicles turned off the main road and pulled into the lot. Dark sedans moving with that particular unhurried certainty of cars that didn't need to announce themselves. They parked in a line near the entrance. Marcus watched them. Then he walked to the lobby. Special Agent Victoria Landry came through the front doors with agents behind her. She was a lean woman in a dark jacket, with close-cropped natural hair and the kind of composed, forward-moving energy that cleared a path without asking for one. She had a leather portfolio under one arm and federal warrants in her hand, and she walked into the Greystone Falls Police Department like she had every right to be there, which she did. She and Marcus looked at each other for exactly 1 second. Then they both looked at the main hall. Officers, every shift, every unit, packed into the space in the uneven way that large groups arrange themselves when they don't know what they're there for. Some standing straight, some leaning against walls, some with coffee cups, some with their arms folded. The room was loud with low conversation. Then the conversation stopped. It stopped the way sound stops in a room when something enters that doesn't belong to the ordinary run of things. Officers saw the federal agents come through the lobby, and the silence moved through the hall like a wave. Victoria stepped to the front of the room. She opened the portfolio. My name is Special Agent Victoria Landry, FBI Civil Rights Division. Her voice was clear and carried easily to every corner of the room. I have federal warrants for the arrest of the following individuals. She looked down at the document. Derek Payne. Roman Farrell. She named more officers. Men Marcus had clocked in the first week. Men whose names appeared in Farrell's chain of messages. Men who had collected cash on Harwell Street and called it routine patrol. She looked up from the page. If those individuals are in this room, step forward now. Nobody moved for 2 full seconds. Then Payne stepped forward. Not because he was cooperating, because standing still was no longer an option, and he knew it. And whatever else Derek Payne was, he wasn't a man who ran. He came forward with his jaw tight and his eyes moving. To Landry, to the agents flanking her, to Marcus standing against the far wall. And when his eyes reached Marcus, they stopped. Marcus looked back at him. He wore the same expression he had worn in the back of Payne's patrol car, the same expression he had worn in the processing chair. Controlled, patient, complete. Except that now he was standing in his own building, in his own uniform, with his name on the door down the hall, and Payne was walking toward a federal agent with a warrant in her hand. Landry cuffed Payne herself. Read him his rights in a clear, even voice. Then she moved to Farrell, who had gone the color of old concrete and was staring at a point on the floor somewhere past his own feet. Arrests. No shouting, no chaos. Just the clean, quiet machinery of consequence, moving exactly the way it was supposed to move. When the last set of cuffs closed, the room was absolutely still. Landry nodded once to Marcus as she passed him on the way out. He nodded back. He turned to face the officers remaining in the hall. Every eye was on him. The room held its breath. "We have work to do," he said. Sheila found it that afternoon. She came to Marcus's office and told him to come with her. No explanation, just that. And the particular set of her expression that meant she had something he needed to see immediately. He followed her down the back corridor to the server room, a narrow space that smelled like electronics and recycled air, where a monitor on the wall showed a grid of security camera feeds. Sheila pulled up a saved file. The footage was grainy. A maintenance corridor camera positioned above the locker room entrance. Low resolution. The kind of camera that nobody thinks to check because it's not pointed at anything that seems to matter. Sheila let it play. Roman Farrell walked into frame. He was in civilian clothes. He moved quickly and with purpose down the corridor, pushed through the locker room door, and disappeared inside. Later, he came out. Empty-handed going in. Empty-handed coming out. The door swung shut behind him. Sheila stopped the playback. "Dana's locker is the third on the left," she said. Marcus looked at the frozen image on the screen. Farrell in the corridor caught by a camera he had never thought to check. Unedited. A federal prosecutor's exhibit hiding in a maintenance server. "Get it to Landry," Marcus said. "Today." Dana Brooks was reinstated. Marcus called her himself. She picked up on the first ring, and when he told her, the line was quiet for a moment that said everything. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but only just. "Full back pay?" she said. "Full back pay. Full reinstatement. Your access restored by end of day." Another pause. "Okay," she said. Quiet and complete. She was at her desk by noon. The dominoes fell in the order they deserved to fall. The FBI's financial records, subpoenaed from separate banks, showed a series of cash deposits into an account, held jointly by Judge Clayton Burke, and a real estate LLC, whose other principal was Derek Payne. Years of transactions. They ran parallel to years of favorable rulings in cases involving Payne's officers, dismissed complaints, reduced charges, suppressed evidence. The pattern wasn't subtle once you looked directly at it. The Georgia Judicial Qualifications Commission received the referral. The temporary restraining order was vacated. The 2 city council members who had issued their joint statement calling for Marcus's resignation held a press conference. They stood at a podium outside City Hall in matching expressions of grave concern and announced their complete and unwavering support for Chief Webster, their full confidence in his leadership, and their commitment to the reform process he had initiated. One of them used the word courageous to describe Marcus's handling of the situation. The local television anchor who covered the press conference live read the statement aloud on camera with the carefully neutral expression of a professional working very hard to maintain it. She did not succeed entirely. The clip was shared widely online before the broadcast was finished. That evening, Harwell Street business owners, Reggie Taylor among them, attended a community meeting at the church 2 blocks from Earl's house. Marcus was there. He listened more than he spoke. Reggie sat in the front row with his hands folded and his jaw set, and the particular dignity of a man who had been knocked down and gotten back up, and was now watching the people who knocked him down get carried out. Gerald Manning was charged. The FBI's records of Farrell's text sent the morning of the arrest, reading "My name is ready." Blue House on Linden. New arrival expected morning. Established his participation clearly enough that his attorney advised him not to contest it. Manning was older and had lived on Linden Court for years, and he sat in a federal arraignment room and learned that the men he had trusted to protect him had not extended that protection to federal charges. Greystone Insider published a retraction. It acknowledged that the original story about Marcus Webster had been based on claims provided by sources who had since been federally indicted, and that the publication regretted the harm caused by its reporting. Marcus read it once. Then he set his phone face down on his desk. Sheila knocked and came in. "Mayor called," she said. "She wants the press conference steps. Tomorrow morning." Marcus looked out his window at the parking lot, the same lot where Dana had crossed the asphalt toward him with her phone in her hand and her jaw set and everything on the line. "Tell her works," he said. The morning was clear and cool. Marcus stood at the window of his office, dressed in full uniform, watching the street in front of the precinct fill up slowly. People were parking down the block and walking over. Not a crowd yet, but growing. He recognized some faces. Reggie Taylor was already there, standing near the bottom of the steps with his hands in his jacket pockets. The pastor from the swearing-in. The woman from the neighborhood association who had driven to watch him take an oath. He turned from the window and straightened his badge and walked out. The steps of the Greystone Falls Police Department faced east, and the sun was low and direct and turned everything gold. Marcus stood at the top of the steps and looked out at the people gathered below him and took one quiet breath. Sheila was to his right. Dana Brooks stood to Sheila's right, back in uniform, badge polished, chin level, the posture of someone who had been through something and come out the other side without losing their shape. Mayor Hanson stood to Marcus's left. She had called him. She said, "I was scared." He said, "I know." She said, "It won't happen again." He believed her. There were no notes on the podium. Marcus didn't need them. He spoke. He did not start with thanks. He did not start with ceremony. He started with the truth because that was the only place worth starting. "Weeks ago," he said, "I was handcuffed in my own driveway by an officer of this department." His voice was even and clear and carried easily across the gathered crowd. I want to be direct about what that was. It was not a mistake. It was not a misunderstanding. It was an organized effort by a group of officers who decided, before I ever walked through those doors, that I was not welcome here. He paused. They were wrong. The crowd was very still. What followed was worse. Files were destroyed. Complaints were buried. A protection racket preyed on businesses in this city, while the people running it believed they were untouchable. He let that sit for a moment. They were wrong about that, too. He looked out at the crowd, at Reggie Taylor near the bottom of the steps, standing straight and still, at the people who had come out because something had happened in their city that they needed to see resolved with their own eyes. I want to name 2 people, Marcus said. He turned slightly to his right. Reggie Taylor has owned a business on Harwell Street for years. He filed a formal complaint that was buried before anyone with authority ever read it. He kept records when he had no guarantee they would ever matter. He came forward when it would have been easier and safer not to. Marcus looked directly at Reggie. Mr. Taylor, this city owes you better than it gave you. That changes today. Reggie pressed his lips together and nodded once. A single contained movement. The posture of a man who had waited a long time to hear something true and was allowing himself, carefully, to receive it. Officer Dana Brooks, Marcus said. Dana didn't move, but something shifted in her expression, a loosening, barely visible, like a door opening a crack. Years on this force. She saw what was wrong in this department, and she made a choice in a parking lot on a morning that cost her something real. He paused. That kind of courage is exactly what this department needs more of, and it will be recognized as such, starting now. He looked back at the crowd. Here is what comes next. A full departmental review. Independent civilian oversight on every unit. Community liaisons in every district. Every buried complaint in this department's files reopened and properly reviewed. He stood straight. This city deserves a police department it can trust. Every person on this street deserves to call for help and know that help is actually coming. Not because of who they are or what they look like or how much they own. Because that is the agreement. That is the contract between this department and this community. And that contract will be honored in Greystone Falls. He stepped back from the podium. The applause that came wasn't loud at first. It built, steady and sustained, and real. The sound of people who had not been sure this moment was ever coming, and were now standing in the middle of it. That evening, Marcus drove to Linden Court. Earl's Buick was already at the curb. They sat on the front porch as the last of the light left the sky. 2 chairs, 2 glasses of sweet tea. The street doing what the street always did in the quiet hours. A neighbor waved from a driveway. A child cut down the sidewalk on a bicycle, standing on the pedals, going fast for the pure pleasure of speed. A car drifted past with its windows cracked, something slow and easy coming from the speakers. Earl said, "Your mother would have liked this house." Marcus smiled. "I know." They were quiet for a while. The oak tree on Dunbar Street was miles away, but Marcus thought about it anyway. The patience of it, the way it just stood there through everything and kept being exactly what it was. "Pop," he said. Earl looked at him. "I've been carrying that photograph for years, the one from outside the precinct." Marcus looked at the street. "I took it out of my desk this morning." Earl waited. "I don't need it anymore." Earl reached over and put his hand on his son's arm. The hand of a man who had stayed in this city through everything it had put him through, who had raised his son on a street like this one, who had waited years for this exact evening without ever letting himself stop believing it was coming. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. They watched the street together, ordinary and extraordinary, An evening in Greystone Falls, Georgia. The gutters were fixed. The porch light was on. Somewhere down the block, a door opened and closed, and someone called a name, and someone else answered. Exactly what it was always supposed to be. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.